What's up guys, it's James Allen, the Out-of-State Investor, and today we're going to be talking about HELOCs. Now I'm a big fan of HELOCs. I've used them on primary residences and I've used them on investment properties. Now HELOCs can be a great tool when used correctly to build massive wealth. When used the wrong way, it can actually cause financial ruin. So today I'm going to walk you through what a HELOC is, how to use a HELOC correctly, how not to use a HELOC, and give you some important questions you need to ask your banker or financial institution whenever you're looking to shop for a HELOC, because believe it or not all HELOCs are created equal. Now before I get started, do me a favor, support the channel by smashing that like button, and if you haven't already done so, definitely subscribe and hit that notification bell to watch more content like this. And with that said, let's jump into it. Alright, so first things first, what is a HELOC? Well, a HELOC stands for a home equity line of credit. It's basically like a credit card. So imagine you have a credit card and you get a $10,000 spending limit. Well, the minute you get that credit card, you're not going to pay any monthly payment on that credit card until you start using it. So if you were to pull out $100 on that credit card, then whatever the interest payment is, you would pay that interest on the $100, not the $10,000. It's basically a credit card attached to your home equity. So in a nutshell, that's basically what a HELOC is, except a HELOC is a much better version of a credit card in that you'll get a much lower interest rate than you will with a credit card, and you'll also get access to a lot more money than you will with a credit card as well. So instead of maybe a $10,000, $20,000 credit limit on a credit card, you may have access to $100,000, $200,000 on your HELOC. And once again, when you close on your HELOC, you're not paying the interest on that $100,000, $200,000. It's only once you withdraw money. So if you withdraw $10,000 of your $100,000 limit, you're going to pay interest on the $10,000. So it makes for a very good situation, especially in short-term situations. Let's say you wanted to flip a property, you only pay interest once you withdraw the money, and you can pay as you go with the rehab. So you're only paying interest as you withdraw the money, and then once you sell the flip, you could repay back that HELOC, and now you're paying zero interest again. Now another cool thing with a HELOC is it doesn't have to be used only as a first position mortgage. Now most people that own a house, they have a mortgage on their property, and that would be a first position mortgage. Now if you were to get an additional mortgage on top of that, that would be a second position mortgage, and that's what you can do with a HELOC, because you're able to avoid having to renew or refinance that current mortgage and change the current interest rate of that. Maybe you have a great 3% interest rate locked in on that current mortgage. You don't have to touch that. You can leave it alone and get a secondary mortgage that taps into all that additional equity you have locked up in the house. Another important thing to note with a home equity line of credit is it carries a variable interest rate. So what this means is that instead of having a fixed interest rate where it stays at 3% or stays at 4% the entire time, it varies. It's a variable interest rate that moves with the market. And so you might have heard about things like the Fed raising interest rates. Well, when they do that, it actually affects the interest rate on your HELOC. And so if they're raising rates, that means most likely the rate on your HELOC is probably going to go up as well, because it moves with the market. Also, it's important to note that a HELOC is not typically like a regular mortgage where you have a 30-year period where you're paying principal and interest, a combination of that over the 30 years. With a HELOC, there's many products that offer you paying an interest-only period for X amount of years, and then after that you'll have a payback period that combines principal and interest. So now that we have a pretty good idea of what a HELOC is, when is a good time to utilize a HELOC? Well, for me, this is a pretty simple question to answer, because really you only want to be using a HELOC if it's something that's going to be making you more money, okay? Because you're already going to have to pay the cost of the interest payments. So in order to make money on this, it has to be an investment that's going to make you even more than what the interest payment is on the HELOC. So for me, I like to invest in real estate. I find that I can get a very high return on investment with that. So the only thing I would ever consider using a HELOC for is to buy more real estate investments. Now, it's not necessarily great for every type of real estate investment, because if you think about it, with a variable interest rate, it has the potential to go up a lot, and especially the way the Fed has been raising rates recently, you want to be very cautious, especially if you're planning on using it for long-term investments. So because of this, it makes much more sense to use a HELOC on shorter-term real estate investments as opposed to longer-term real estate investments. So think things like fix and flips, BRRRR projects, that's your buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat kind of things. things where you can add value to the property, refinance, get all your money back, and then pay down that HELOC again. Now, the reason I say it's better for short-term investments versus long-term is because just like we've been seeing with the Fed constantly raising rates over these past several months, and we know they plan to continue doing that, think of a worst-case scenario where you buy a property, maybe it's cash flowing $200, $100 a month, but then they raise the rates again. Now it's down to $75 a month. They raise the rates again. Now it's down to $50 a month. Now they raise the rates again. Now it's down to $25 a month. And next thing you know, you're cash flow negative. So this is the reality of what can happen if you're using a HELOC for a long-term investment. A quick interruption for today's video sponsor. Today's video sponsor is JSA Real Estate Consulting. This is my consulting business where I schedule consultation calls for those interested in starting in real estate investing or taking their real estate investing to the next level. If that's you and you're interested in exploring that, email me at theoutastateinvestor@gmail.com and we can schedule something that works best for you. Now, if you did want to use a HELOC to invest in a long-term rental property, there actually are some HELOCs that have the ability to do a fixed 20 or 30-year interest rate, which that could be a great solution for a long-term investment because there's nothing to worry about as far as market fluctuation is concerned. Now, some people might be thinking, well, why would I use a HELOC if I could just do a cash-out refinance and get a nice fixed 30-year rate, not having to worry about anything? Well, the first reason you might consider a HELOC instead of a cash-out refinance is you may be pretty far down the line on paying your mortgage. And if you understand how mortgages work, you mostly pay interest up front. So banks like to get you to keep refinancing your mortgage because the more you do that, the more interest you're paying. You pay mostly interest up front, and it's really only on the back end that you really start paying the bulk of the principal. So if you're already at that past the 15-year mark, the 20-year mark, you may be paying mostly principal at this point, and it may not make sense to refinance and start back to year one where you're paying mostly interest again. The second thing you need to consider is you may have a really good interest rate locked in. If you've been a homeowner over the past several years, you may have been able to lock in a 2%, 3%, 4% interest rate, whereas now if you were to do a cash out refinance, you may be looking at over a 6% interest rate. So if you were going to do that on a $500,000 mortgage, that could change your monthly payment dramatically, whereas with a HELOC, because it is a second position mortgage, okay, you don't have to touch that first mortgage. You can completely leave it alone, leave that at a 2 or 3% interest rate, whatever you got it locked in as, and then just the additional $100,000 or $200,000, whatever you're tapping into, that will be at your new 5% or 6% interest rate. The third reason why you might want to consider a HELOC instead of a cash out refinance is closing costs, because when you do a cash out refinance, many times you may be spending over $10,000 in order to do a cash out refinance because of things like loan origination fees when you're doing these kind of things. Whereas with a HELOC, you don't have anything close to that. You could end up coming out of pocket maybe a couple $100 just to close on the HELOC. So those are a few reasons why you might want to choose a HELOC instead of a cash out refinance. But on top of that, another reason to consider is that with a HELOC, you have the ability to tap into even more equity. You have HELOCs that will let you go at 90% loan to value. What that basically means is that whatever the value is, they'll give you a loan on up to 90% of that value. Whereas with a cash out refinance, often they're capping you at about 80% loan to value. So it gives you the opportunity that if you have all that equity, you can actually get a little bit more money, that if you're able to use it and get a better return on investment elsewhere with real estate investments, you're able to get access to more capital. So with that said, when would be a bad time to use a HELOC? Well, for me, what I would say is I highly recommend not using a HELOC for things like cars, purses, luxury goods, clothes, whatever it may be, something that is just a material good. Do not waste your money on a HELOC doing that, because not only is it just a bad investment and you're gonna have to pay interest on that, and it's basically financing clothes over 30 years, it doesn't make any sense. But on top of that, you're gonna hurt your debt to income ratio, because now your monthly expenses are even higher, and that could really affect your future ability to qualify for a house down the road. So you don't wanna mess that up for something as silly as buying luxury goods, cars, purses, clothes. Another thing I highly recommend not using a HELOC on is home repairs. Now this might shock a lot of people, because I know a lot of people that like to use their HELOCs on home repairs. They like to fix up their kitchen. They like to remodel their bathroom, or maybe even put in that pool they've always wanted. But the reality is it's not smart financially speaking to get a variable interest rate or even a fixed interest rate at that point just to remodel a bathroom or remodel a kitchen. It's not worth it. And many times people overspend on this. They hire the wrong contractors, or they end up spending too much on materials, that they don't get a good return on investment, and so as a result of this, it ends up becoming a poor overall financial choice. It's much better to have the cash to do something like that. Whereas if you want to use the HELOC for something like maybe you're raising the rents in a rental property because you're upgrading the kitchen there, or maybe you're using a HELOC to maybe finish off a fix and flip to where there's a profit at the end of it, or a cash out refinance at the end of something, that makes more sense. But don't waste your money on a HELOC using it towards a primary residence, just making it look a little nicer. So overall, basically the point I'm trying to make here is don't use a HELOC on anything that's not going to make you money. A HELOC can be a great tool when used correctly, but when used incorrectly, it's something that's just going to add more stress. It's going to add more financial strain with an extra monthly payment, especially if it's a variable interest rate that's going to move with the market. It could become a very stressful situation, and it's not worth investing that money into something that's not paying you anything back. So only use HELOCs towards things that make you money, not things that cost you money. So if you've decided at this point that you feel like a HELOC might be the way to go, there's a few things I need you to understand before you proceed with talking to bankers. First things first is that not every lender has the same DTI requirements. Now again, DTI is your debt to income. It's the amount of debt you have monthly against the amount of income. And based on that, of what you have, they're going to lend to you based on your qualifications for that. So some banks may have a 45% debt to income ratio, and some may offer up to a 55% debt to income ratio. So unless you're like a Graham Stephan or Meet Kevin, where you're balling out and you're making a lot of money like that, if you're a regular person making six figures or even less than that, then you may want to consider going with multiple banks just as far as seeing what the options are, because you may qualify for a $50,000 HELOC with one bank, maybe a $100,000 HELOC with another bank on the same house. Another thing you want to ask your bank or financial institution is, what is the draw period and what is the payback period, and is there any of that that's interest only? Okay, I'll give you an example with a couple of the banks I've worked with. Okay, one of the banks will offer a 10-year interest only period where you have a draw period. You can just withdraw, you can put it back, and then there's a 20-year period on the back end that is pure payback. Over time, you're paying principal and interest over that 20-year period, slowly paying back that HELOC. Then I have another bank that offers a 5-year interest only period where you can deposit and withdraw as you please, another 5-year period after that where it's principal and interest with a deposit and withdraw as you please, and then a 20-year payback that just slowly pays down the HELOC from then on. So as you can see, the banks can structure it in many different ways, so you really want to get a good idea on what their draw period is, what their payback period is, and is there any interest only involved in any of that. Finally, you want to understand the rest of the terms of the loan. So think of things like loan to value. Are they offering you 80% loan to value, 85% loan to value, 90% loan to value? Typically it's better if you can get access to more money, but oftentimes what you'll find is that the higher the loan to value, the higher the interest rate will be. So you want to compare that. An 80% loan to value may be 5%, but maybe a 90% loan to value is a 7%. So you just want to compare and contrast between the different options that you have. Now, as far as interest rates go, when it comes to HELOCs, they typically operate off of the prime rate. So whatever prime rate is, let's say it's 5%, it'll be like prime plus 1, prime plus 2, and that's again short talk for prime plus 1%, prime plus 2%. So you want to understand what are the terms of your deal and understand that as the Fed raises rates, it affects the prime rate. So prime may go up from 5% to 6%, which then means if you're prime plus 1, you would be 6% plus that 1%, making your HELOC rate at 7%. Another question to ask is, are you able to fix the interest rate after pulling out the money for your HELOC? Now, not every bank's going to allow you to do this, but I know that banks like PenFed allow it, banks like PNC allow it. So you'll want to ask your bank or financial institution if they'll allow you to do a fixed rate, because in this environment we're in right now where interest rates are getting raised all the time with the Federal Reserve and we're trying to combat inflation, I think it's a really good idea right now, if you have a variable interest rate and you're able to fix it, to take full advantage of that. So it's definitely a question you want to ask the bank or financial institution that you're looking to get a HELOC with. You also want to get a good idea if there's any additional fees involved with getting the home equity line of credit, such as, are there closing costs? If so, how much are they? Is there any annual fee involved with holding on to this home equity line of credit? And is there a cancellation fee or any penalty for closing down the line of credit early? So these are the questions I highly recommend asking any banker or financial institution that you're looking to get your HELOC at. And in addition to that, I'd say just remember to use your HELOC to progress your financial situation, not hold yourself back financially. And with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, do me a favor, support the channel and smash that like button. And if you haven't already done so, definitely subscribe, hit that notification bell to watch more content like this. Also, if you have any banks or financial institutions that you recommend getting a HELOC at, let us know in the comments below, whether it's for a primary residence or a rental property, and also share the terms that you were able to get. Finally, follow me on TikTok and Instagram at the Out of State Investor. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.